we're live. Hello, everyone. This is Connie from Chaos to Peace, and I'm with Linda, the energy expert. Hello, Linda. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
That didn't sound convincing. Sorry.
For November, yes, I am.
Did you have a busy morning like me?
Yes. So all of a sudden, I looked at the. 1 minute, I thought, "Oh, I have plenty of time." The next minute, I looked at the clock. It's like, okay, I need to. Yes, one of those mornings.
Yeah, and I was getting interviewed before, and it just took longer and longer, and I'm like, oh my god. So today we wanted to talk about values and priorities, and some people might be surprised because, again, when we talk about clutter, most people don't necessarily think of priorities and values, but I do. So before we even really start, what was your first thought when you saw what I wanted to talk about?
Well, of course, it makes total sense to me. What I think of when you mentioned values and priorities is how often we say something is important to us. It's a very high value. It's a priority, and yet we ignore it. You know, we put something else as more of a priority, and sometimes we don't even really know we're doing that. Maybe subconsciously we do, but not on a conscious level. Or we get frustrated with ourselves because we want to do something because it is important to us, but we just don't. We just avoid it. So that's what popped into my mind when I saw what you wanted.
Yeah, I was sure you would get it totally. But yeah, so there is several angles to this. But yeah, so first I want to say, like, a lot of people never really think what really their values are, maybe not like consciously. Or like you said, they say one thing, they maybe hear somebody talking about values and they think, oh yeah, that's my value too. But what they're not realizing is we can come up with all kinds of thoughts and statements what our values are. But it's actually what we're doing is reflecting what our values are, or doing or not doing, you know?
Yeah.
That said, oftentimes we might declare something as our value and we even believe it and want this to be our value, but we're scared to step out of our comfort zone, and that's why we're not doing anything. So but then still, like, if we want to be strict, then I still would say it's not your value if you're not doing anything like towards it. Like, if we're and I'm not, and we have to say on this too, is like, it's not about, oh, you have to, whenever a thought pops in your head, you have to do it right away. But if you notice that you're procrastinating or that you have it on the to-do list and it gets bumped further and further back, that's for sure an indication that it's not a priority or not a value in your life. Otherwise, you would do it.
Well, I think we're seeing some of this coming perhaps more into people's consciousness since COVID and people working from home. And so, for example, a lot of times people will say, my family is my highest priority. That's the most important thing to me. And yet they'll be working so many hours that they never get to spend time with their family. And this is not a judgment or a criticism. It's just, this is what you are putting your energy into. And I think the pandemic and people working from home, it started to show that to people. It's like, well, actually, yes, I'm working from home, but I get to spend more time with my family now. And actually now I know that is more important to me. So it's really a case of, it might be really important to you, but are you putting your energy into it? Where are you putting your energy?
Yeah. Or are you putting your energy in the right way? Because, like, for example, I come from finance. So in finance, we often say this too, is like, people, because they're saying family is my highest priority, they go and work to be able to provide for the family in order to later then have time to spend with the family. And then when something sad happens, like somebody may God forbid, die or get really sick, then they can't get this time back that they were constantly gone. So like the intention or the thought is their family is my highest priority, but they're actually putting money as the highest priority, or they feel like only with providing a high income or a lot of money, I'm showing that I'm valuing my family instead of actually spending time, or at least ask the other person what would be, how would you feel valued by me, more with money or more with, like there might be some family members who put money higher than time, but there's oftentimes that's exactly what happens. The family members are sad because the other person never has time, even though they say you're my highest priority, but they're showing the highest priority by working like 80 hours.
Right. It's a way we kind of fool ourselves and justify things, because yes, by working really hard and providing as much income as you can and providing as many things as you can for your family, that may be a way that you're showing that your family is your highest priority. But what does that really mean? Because what that does then is it really distances you from your family, because you're never there. Mm-hmm. So if family is your highest priority, how could you show that in a different way? So again, it always comes down to what we talk about, self-awareness and being really honest with ourselves about what we're putting our attention on, what we're putting our energy into, and is it taking away from instead of adding to what's really important for us. Mm-hmm. So it's a big conversation.
It is a big conversation, but I feel like a lot of people, when it's about decluttering, and so I'm there with them, and there is stuff there that they never use, and they say to me, oh, this is really important to me. And I'm like, okay, like let's say a hobby or a crafts comes to mind a lot of times. Or some hobby, could even be a fitness hobby, like playing tennis, Linda, or whatever. And they have all this gear, but then they haven't done it. And oh no, I can't let this go because this is very important to me. And I'm like, okay, when did you knit last? When did you go ski last? Or whatever the item is. And then, oh, I haven't had time in years. I never did it. And so, okay, but then it's neither a value nor a priority, because it's just, the stuff is just sitting here. And this is where it starts. And I'm not saying people have to just throw out all their stuff. I always say, like, it's not my place to tell anybody what to get rid of, but it's just where you can start thinking. So, okay, when I say this is really important to me, but I haven't looked at it or touched it in years, it can't be that important. And that's where what you just said comes in, to be honest with yourself, be aware and be honest, and then go from that place to make a decision. And the decision can be either way. The decision can be, I'm going to let it go because I'm now in a different phase of my life. And this used to be important, but if I'm honest with myself, it's not anymore. Or we go the other way and we say, I really need to have this back in my life. So how can I make room in my calendar to actually go and do this again?
I would say it's not that people are consciously, wanting to be dishonest with themselves. No. It's just that we get in such a rut or in such a habit of doing things that we don't even really think about it. That's why I love self-inquiry, constantly checking in with yourself to see if something's important to you still. I was talking to a lady who told me she just left. She does some kind of craft. It might be quilting or something like that. Anyway, so she had been in these two groups for a long time, and she said she suddenly realized she realized she didn't feel good after being with these groups of people. Mm-hmm. And so she asked herself, why am I feeling this way? Is this still current for me? And realized that she was putting energy and time into these groups when they weren't a fit for her. Now, they may well have been in the beginning, but they weren't anymore. So often we stay with something like that just because, that's what we've done. So that's why I like regular self-inquiry, just to check in with ourselves to see, is this still relevant for me? Is this where I want to be putting my energy? Is this, what effect is this having on me? And how does it reflect what I feel is important?
Yeah. And then oftentimes it's also that we do have changes in our life. So it's like one thing that comes to mind is like either when you're young, when you're going from being single to getting married, then when you're going from just being a couple to having children. But the clients I often and come across is later. So when the children are flying the nest and they become empty nesters, so-called, no? And then but their whole environment still reflects when the children were still home and they haven't moved on. And so I feel like sometimes it's also we're sentimental, and I'm the first one who is very sentimental. But we're sentimental and we're hanging on to the good old times. And this is also when then our life and our home doesn't reflect the stage we are in our own life. And of course it's always kind of like change is hard. We humans don't want to have change, so that comes in our way as well. But once we're moving towards it, it's freeing now. So that's where self-awareness comes in again too.
Yeah. Well, I would like to point out something, that if we continue to ignore, that's why self-inquiry is so good, because if we continue to ignore what's really important to us, and just not be aware of it, change will often be forced upon us.
Yeah.
And so we have to face it. We have to deal with it. I think I've worked with many women who have gone through a divorce, been married for years, raised the children together, and then all of a sudden what they say is out of the blue, the husband announces he wants a divorce, or he's met somebody else or something like that. And the woman is devastated, and she's been holding on so hard to that life, but when you really start to talk to them and ask some specific questions, it didn't come out of the blue. There were things, she was not able to fully be herself and to really focus on what was important to her and get in touch with that. And so because of that, because of kind of ignoring that for so long, it reaches a point where change is forced on you. And then you have to think about that, and you have to think about, oh, this is what's really important to me now. And now I have an opportunity to move into that. But we're so busy holding on to the familiar and what has been that we ignore our own needs and lose touch with what's really important to us. That happens so often. But if you do that, it will very often be forced on you. So it's a great thing to recognize the power of self-inquiry, because you can avoid that having to happen to you.
To a degree, you can avoid it, yes. And I feel like one of the issues we have, and I think I talked about this before too, is like we are not taught, or we are not good at dealing with grief, and anything that means to letting go requires grief work, so to speak. It's not somebody doesn't have to die that you can experience grief. And we go through these lives. And one other theory that because I'm a learning addict, so I'm inquiring all these things. And one other thing that I heard, and that makes totally sense to me, is also that we're not celebrating the stages of life anymore. So these transitions, like in the old days, they were more celebrating these transitions, what's going on in a human life, like with the growing up and becoming an adult, becoming middle age, becoming old and wise. No, we're not celebrating this. It's this cult of we all want to stay young and and fresh. So then we're not equipped with how do we deal with these transitions. So that's why we cling to the old, I find sometimes, instead of looking excited to what life is bringing now in the new stage.
You're right. It's so much of holding on to what we've known. And you're right. Each phase of life brings new things to look forward to, new opportunities. I mean, you just aren't going to be the same in your 40s or 50s as you were in your 20s. Things that are important to you are not going to be the same. So if we think they should be, then we will struggle quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think environment often reflects that, doesn't it? That with the things that we have around us.
Yeah.
When we're trying to hold on to the past,
Yeah. I encounter that a lot. Like we're holding on to the big house that we had when we had all 4 children at home, for example, and we're maintaining this huge house that has that is now mostly empty, instead of figuring out, okay, what would be the right house for the stage I'm in now, and on and on. Like it's
or downsizing, moving to a smaller house, but trying to take everything from the big house with you.
Yeah, that creates a lot of clutter too. Yeah, but then moving on its own, even if it's exciting for you, even if you wanted to do it, there's still grief involved, because you kind of have to say goodbye to the old place. It becomes more and more obvious the old life is over, and so now something new starts. And while you're excited maybe for the new, if you are aware of it, you're still having a sadness inside of you. And we're not taught how to deal with this, or how to acknowledge it, how to let it be there. We may want to try to stuff it away and not look at it. So
that's interesting, because I've moved many times, and people will often say to me, if I'm going back, especially if I go back to England or somewhere like that, somewhere where I've lived before, people will say to me, oh, did you go drive by your old house? And I will think, why would I do that? It's not my house. It wasn't my house the minute I left it, Yeah. So that's always been a strange thing to me. But many people do feel that way. It's like that nostalgia for, all the memories that were there and the life that they had there. That's interesting.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm the most sentimental, so I'm not necessarily going back, but I do remember specifically 2 places I lived that I actually really loved living there. And one place I was forced to move from there. That was I probably wouldn't have if I didn't have to. And the other one I chose. That was when I moved to Canada. I chose to leave that place. But I feel like it's not wrong to have sentimental thoughts about it. But if it hinders you, or if it holds you back, like if you're not moving in your life because of it, then it's time to put some awareness on that and figure out what it is.
Yeah, I'm probably too much the other way, and there's probably a whole show we could have on that. It's probably not the healthiest thing either. Just like, let it go, move on. I don't know. There must be some attachment thing there, or lack of attachment. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, now again, this is where it's so important to just listen to yourself. And I remember with you talking about this before, because and I use astrology to understand people better. And to me, this is not a surprise what you're telling me. This is just how you are wired. And so this is where I often have to help my clients too, and say, just because this and this person doesn't have a problem with it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a problem, if we want to use this word, because you're wired different. So get to know you, get to understand you, and then find ways to, and I don't want to say deal with you, but take care of you and how you are. And you, Linda, you may now not be sentimental, and you can just put it to the side. So, but then you may have to be aware of other things. And this is where we're all different, which is also a beautiful thing.
Well, it is. Again, self-awareness. It's, you cannot compare yourself to anybody else because everybody is different. Everybody's experiences are different. Everybody's feelings are different. The way we handle things is different. So it's all about, I think, knowing and accepting who you are and what's, again, like we talked about, what's important to you. And it doesn't have to look like anything else that anybody else does or anybody else says. It's about what feels right to you.
Exactly. And this is where it comes in, where we actually need to pay attention to what we're saying are our values and priorities and what we're actually doing in our life. you know and it can easily happen, like you said in the beginning. We're so caught up in the busyness, and we have so much on our plate. This is where I always say is the social clutter, where we're pleasing and we're looking after everybody else, and we're saying yes too much instead of thinking first what the consequences are. And then we're getting so caught up in the hamster wheel that we actually completely lose sight of what actually we're saying that is important to us.
And if you're saying something is important to you but you're not doing anything about it, okay, the common ones are, I want to lose weight, that's really important to me, or I want to exercise more, that's really important to me, and you're not doing it, instead of beating yourself up about it or judging yourself or criticizing yourself for it, just ask yourself why. And not in a harsh way, but, I wonder why. I'm saying that this is really important to me. I wonder why I'm not doing that, or wonder why I'm making this more of a priority than that. And if you start to ask questions like that, just in a gentle way, you will start to gain some insights. It's all about understanding you and what's going on with you. And if something's important to you, you will learn what it is you need to do to be able to put more of your energy there.
Yeah. And I often say to my clients, it's like, whose voice is it that tells? Because it can already happen that we say something is important to us when we just think that needs to be important to us, but it's actually not. So this is often a sign too. And then I always ask, it's like, whose voice is it? Go figure it out. And one of my mentor actually said once, you're always around between 5 and 7 when that voice starts to come. And if you so whose voice is it? Who in your life said that? Or why do you think you're thinking this? Because clearly this is not what you believe, otherwise you would do it.
Right.
And so that's also how you can figure out what your values really are. They're not the ones that you think you're supposed to have. They might be completely different ones.
You can also ask, is this where I want to be putting my time and my energy right now?
Yeah.
And just see what comes to you. You might say, yes, absolutely. You might say, well, no, it really isn't. And then you can ask, well, what would I rather be putting my time and energy into? This takes practice. It's not something you will change overnight, and it might not even be a problem for you. But if it is, then you'll identify that. But again, self-awareness. Always.
Yeah, no, don't create a problem where there is no problem. But sometimes people are not aware that it is actually a problem because they're running in their hamster wheel so much that they, oh no, there's no problem, everything is fine. But hindsight 2020, right?
Yeah. So, well, and that's why, as we're coming to the end of the year now, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to really reevaluate where you've been putting your time and your energy and what is important to you, and is what was important to you this year the same as what you want to focus on going into the next year. I think it's the perfect time to do that. And I think this time of year is a great time for just pausing, reflecting, and asking yourself, what is important? What are my values now?
Yeah. What are my values and priorities? What stage of life am I in? What do I want to create from now on? And how can the environment that I'm in support me with that?
Right.
And what can I let go out of this environment to make my life easier afterwards?
Oh yes, that's a whole conversation on its own right there.
Exactly. Well, but as always, this was awesome, Linda. I think we don't need to beat the horse to death,
No.
however the saying is going. I think I want to encourage everyone who watches this to just become aware and think a little bit. What are my values? What are my priorities? And am I living them or not? And awareness is everything, right?
Yeah, awareness is everything. Yeah.
Okay, Linda, then that was awesome. See you next week.
See you next week. We'll be live on my channel.
Yes.
And I think we're going to be talking about letting go of things.
Right down my alley, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Right down your alley. All right. Well, I will see you then.
See you then. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.